I'll start. You'll start. All right.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Elizabeth Peterson. I am Chief Negotiator for Support Staff, one of the directors at Island Coast FEA. I'm doing well. I believe I have everyone here from my team. And the district will have to note who's missing on their side. Time constraints, 7, no elephants, and expectations, make progress.
Hi, Jonathan Tuttle, FEA. I'm fine. No time constraints, no elephants, expectations, hoping for agreement on compensation.
Good afternoon, Amanda Evans, bus operator, president of SPALC. Doing good. Missing time constraint as soon as possible. No elephant, expectation, agreement, or compensation.
Good afternoon, everyone. Vivian Hawkins, paraprofessional, vice president of paraprofessionals. I'm doing fine. No missing noted. No time constraints. No elephants. Expectation, making progress.
Good evening. My name is Arlise Williams. I am the Vice President of Transportation. I am well. I see Amy Desamore is not here. Time constraint as soon as possible. No elephants and expectation to get something done.
Hello, I'm Tony Abrams. I'm the bookkeeper at Royal Palm Exceptional School. I'm doing well. Who's missing has been noted. No time constraints, no elephants, and expectations to get things done.
Hello, I'm Penny Bennett. I am Executive Vice President for Central Services. I'm fine. Missing is noted. I have no time constraints. I have no elephants, and expectations are to get an agreement on compensation.
My name is Roger Wilson. I'm fine. Missing is noted. No time constraints, no elephants, and expectations to make progress.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Rafael Cruz. I'm doing fine. What's missing to be noted, and no time constraints, no elephants. Expectations is to get done.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Ken Neese, Tech Support Specialist at Varsity. Doing well. Missing's been noted. No time constraints, no elephants. Expectation is to make progress.
Thanks, Donna. Good afternoon, I'm Robert Dodig. I am the Executive Director of Human Resources and the Chief Negotiator for the district. I am well. Barbara Cedeno is missing from our team. Amy is missing, but Amy is being substituted by Kelly Letcher tonight. And for the foreseeable future, Kelly is the Director of Budget for the school district. I have no time constraints, elephants, and my expectation is to make progress.
I'm Will Rothenberg. I'm Director of Compensation and Labor Relations. Missing, I believe, is noted. No time constraints, no elephants, and expectation would be to get something done.
Good evening. My name is Heather Leonard. I'm the Director of Staffing and Talent Management. I'm doing well this evening. I believe the missing have already been noted. I don't have any time constraint outside of our 7 o'clock. No elephants, and I'd love to get something done this evening.
Good afternoon. My name is Bonnie McFarland. I'm doing well. Missing has been noted. Time constraints. I do have to step out and hold an AP training. Haven't figured out how to be in 2 places at once, so I'll be there and then I'll be back. And no elephants, expectation, get something done.
Hi, my name is Kelly Letcher. I am the Director of Budget, and I am stepping in Dr. Desimore's place for a while. Missing has been noted. No time constraints, no elephants, and expectations is just to get caught up and make progress.
Excuse me. Kimberly Hutchins, Director of Payroll. I'm good. Missing is noted. No time constraints, no elephants, and get something done.
Good afternoon, Christine Schroed, I'm doing well. Missing noted, I do not have time constraints beyond 7, no elephants, and expectation is to make progress.
Hello, everybody. I'm Jason Kurtz, principal of Hector Cafferata Elementary. I am doing well. Missing has been noted. No time constraints, no elephants. Let's make some progress.
Good afternoon, my name is Roger Lloyd. I'm doing well. Missing is noted, time constraints, 7 p.m., no elephants, and make progress.
Hello, my name is Candy Messenger. I'm the Director of Food Service. I'm doing well. Missing has been noted, no time constraints, no elephants, and expectations is to get something done.
Hi, I'm Shannon Johnston, and I'm doing great. Missing is noted. I do have a time constraint of 6:30 tonight. No elephants, and my expectation is to make progress.
My name is Jamie Broder. I'm the principal at Orchard Elementary. I am great. Missing has been noted. No time constraints, no elephants, and get something done.
Hi, I'm Suzette Rivera, the Assistant Director for Recruitment. I'm doing well. Missing has been noted. No time constraints, no elephants, and my expectation is to make progress.
Good evening, Helen Martin, Assistant Director of Professional Development. I'm doing well. Missing has been noted. I have no time constraints, no elephants, and expectations make progress.
I'm Amy Fern. I'm doing well. Missing has been noted. We're missing Amanda, but just me. Time constraints. I don't have any elephants and elephants, or happy birthday, Will. Our expectations are to agreement on compensation.
All right. Good afternoon, I'm Donna. I'm doing fine. I have no time constraints, and my expectation is to help you get to all your expectations. And with that, my food just broke and fell apart. Fortunately, I brought another pair of shoes. In case these didn't work. You're always a sucker. That's right. Just for a second, put in the papers up. I do apologize for getting started late, but we were setting up a computer presentation and technology doesn't always cooperate the way we want it to, so I do apologize, but we'll get going now. And I believe we are going to start with the presentation. So with that, we have the SPALC salary presentation. And Jonathan? Mount should be clicker.
All right, do I have a microphone? Am I streaming? I'll hold that too. Okay, this is going to be great.
Give you that one, but they don't work.
Yeah, we tried that last time.
Yeah.
Okay, good evening, everybody. Well, half of you, and the other half on the other side of the boards there. Just want to do a little bit of review from our last meeting, but also introduce you to a couple of other ideas that I think should be taken into consideration before we present our salary proposal. This starts right at sort of the core of school districts in Florida. This is, by statute, every district in Florida has to report to the state administrative expenditures per unweighted full-time equivalent students. This definition here is right off the DOE website. This is a little translation. Basically, what it does is it shows every school district splitting the money, I guess, their expenditures between instructional and administrative. And that's not always clear on the AFR because there is some overlap, like school administration, for instance. We need our finance folks to sort of differentiate within that function what is administrative and what is instructional. Our position, SPALC's position, is that the money spent closest to the students is money best spent. So taking a look, I hope you can see that, it looks pretty big. This takes a look at Lee County's expenditures back to 2016-17. And this first part here is all instructional. In the red, we see the percentage of general fund dollars being spent on instructional expenditures. And then this other percentage is on administrative costs. And this, as I said, goes back 4 years. The most recent data we have is 2019-20. And so we don't see a big difference between 16-17 and 19-20. We had a little rise, and then a little dip here. This alone doesn't tell us a whole lot. We think 91 point whatever is probably pretty good to spend in instructional. I'm sorry, I'm not feeling too well. I apologize for the coughs. So what I did is not only we look at the district, school district through time, but also compare them with similar sized districts. Now with something like this, you can't really compare a school district this size with a school district like Glades, because there are some central costs, of course, that would drop the instructional level of spending for a smaller county like Glades as opposed to a larger one like Lee County. So what we did is we looked back and we calculated other school districts plus or minus 25% of our size. And this is the entire list right here. And here's Lee County down here at the bottom. We see Polk County at 93, almost 94%, 93.82%. Their budget is designed, and a budget we believe is a reflection of priorities. They prioritize their budget to spend closest to the kids as they could. And in this group, we see us more than 2% lower than Polk County. And 2% might not sound like a whole lot. Here's another graphic showing it, going from 94 down to 90.5. And here's Lee County down here. And again, as a reflection of priorities, we think money is best spent closest to the kids. And while it doesn't sound like a whole lot, what's 2%? Well, 2% of $670-something million is about $13.5 million. That's how much more Lee County would have to spend on instructional expenditures to reach that 93.5% where Polk is. And we think that that's kind of big. It sort of sets the table for other smaller decisions as you move through the budget. The second part here is a little matter of review. This continues our discussion from our last meeting about the sources of funding. As just a reminder, we showed the budget year after year in Lee County, and we showed what was actually spent in Lee County on instructional salary. And instruction being defined by DOE is that classroom expenditures directly related to educating our students. And again, as a reminder, our position, this is the crux of our position, is that we've already budgeted here in Lee County enough money for this current school year to easily fund SPALC's salary proposal. And this is the same sort of information we saw last time on the Excel sheet. This just brings it home a little bit better in chart form. And please notice, these are $50 million increments on this axis here. And this goes back to 2016-17 as well. And we see budget in the blue and the actual in the salmon color. And year after year, this is significantly over budgeted. And for this current school year, we have another $8 million budgeted on top of what was budgeted and not spent last year. Another way to look at it, our axis now is in $10 million increments, and at no point was this object over budgeted less than $22 million. Last year, it's over $50 million that was budgeted. And when we say budget, when everybody makes a budget, anybody, it's what they plan to spend, what they're prepared to spend. That's why you put it in writing as a budget. So we are prepared to spend that much money in Lee County on instructional salary. And you'll see in a few slides, we're going to get to the SPALC salary proposal. It's minor in comparison to what is already written into the budget year after year after year and not spent. This third item is a new one. This is a materials and supplies object. Just as, again, as a matter of review, a function like instruction has 7 objects within it. One of those objects is salary that we just talked about. Another one of those objects is materials and supplies. So when you're buying consumables for the classroom, that would fall under the materials and supplies object within the instruction function. Hold on, I'm sorry, I gotta take one sip of water here. What makes this object a little unique is that the state has what's called a categorical. The state sends money to every school district in Florida specifically for what they call instructional materials, which is the same as materials and supplies within the instruction function. This money sent by the state can only be spent on instructional materials. It can't be spent on salary or anything else. So, why are we talking about this? Well, you probably saw this coming. When we look at this object within the instruction function of the general fund, we see that this object as well is chronically and excessively over budgeted year after year. Again, back to 16-17, you can see the numbers. These, again, are in $5 million increments if you can't see from where you're sitting. But there is a significant difference between what you prepared to spend, planned to spend, and actually spent. And while it did drop a little bit this year, this current school year, it only dropped by $2 million. And we could safely assume that what will actually be spent will not even approach that amount. Again, here's another way to look at it. This is the actual over-budgeted amount compared to the SPALC proposal. Again, year after year, that's the $20 million mark right there. Generally, we're over-budgeted by $20 million each year. That those funds should be reallocated to be able to spend on salary. And here's where the uniqueness comes in. I tried to color that thing. Oh yeah, you can see it over there, good. Okay, so we're going to bring in sort of the state side of this right now. This left side, we see the budget and the AFR and the difference, and this is the charts we just looked at, and the percent that was actually spent. So in 2020-21, budgeted 39.5, only spent 14.5, a difference of about $25 million. So only 37% of that 39.5 was actually spent. Here's where the state money kicks in. The categorical, this money that came from the state to be spent specifically for this purpose, no other purpose can you spend those dollars. Last year, Lee County spent $11.5 million out of that categorical. So we take that, we wrap it into the general fund dollars that were spent, and we see that we spent $3 million of general fund money in this categorical last year. So out of that 14.5, 11.5 came out of the state money, the state categorical. Here's the kicker though. The categorical unexpended. So while we spent $11.5 million from state money, again, the only thing it could be spent on, we took $5 million of it and put it in the bank. I can't find my cursor. We put $5 million into the restricted fund balance. No, we're not going to spend that. Instead, the decision was made to spend $3 million out of the general fund. That didn't have to happen. Because by definition, those instructional materials from the state would match up with materials and supplies within the instruction function. So that's a $3 million from the general fund that didn't have to be spent. It would have knocked down the unexpended categorical a little bit, but that's fine. That's what that money is there for. And we see it happening year after year. So is $7, $8, $9 million a lot? $5 million a lot? Well, we don't know. I mean, is that a normal thing? The only way to find out, we look at other counties. With this one, we took the entire state. That includes Miami-Dade, that includes Little Glade, that includes everybody. The top 10 for unexpended for the last year for which we have complete data, 2019-20, there's our $9 million in Lee County. The next closest one, the next school district that took a lot of that categorical money and just put it in the bank is Hillsborough down at $6 million. And you can see as it trails off. And these are just the top 10. There are, oh gosh, a dozen, 15 that brought their categorical all the way down to zero. Lee County couldn't bring that unexpended all the way down to zero if they wanted to, but they never have to spend their own general fund dollars on this. That's my point. So yes, it's excessive. How much money is left unexpended when it didn't have to be? And I took it back another year, 18, 19, and we see the same thing. And I guess we keep going back, but I think the point is made. This money ought to be spent. General fund dollars ought to be freed up. So, just as a reminder, if we combine those two, the two items we were just talking about, what was budgeted for instruction and what was budgeted for instructional materials, over budgeted. This is after everything has been paid. We're looking at some pretty excessive amounts. I think this thing, if we look at $10 million increments here, that's like $77 million last year. It was over budgeted. And here's the little SPALC proposal down here. And again, another reminder, and we are not asking to fund the SPALC salary proposal from the fund balance, but the unassigned and assigned fund balance by law has to maintain a minimum of 3% of general revenue. And this chart here, again, as a reminder of last meeting, is what is budgeted, and for some reason, your assigned and unassigned fund balance is always under budgeted significantly and chronically. And we see we're at, I think that's 117 million, hard to tell, it's between 100 and 120 million just for last year. And again, just to put things in perspective, that's our little SPALC proposal down there. So getting to the actual salary proposal, we're almost done. There are currently, as of yesterday anyway, I'm not too sure, I know we've got recruitment people here, there are currently 181 non-instructional, non-administrative vacant positions posted on the district website. This does not include the bus drivers. Bus drivers, I guess, have their own separate page on the career site of your website. I couldn't get into that, I didn't count those, but I hear that number is pretty significant. I don't know the exact number. But of those 181 positions, non-instructional, non-administrative vacant positions, 92 of them were just posted this year. 89 of them remain unfilled from last year. So clearly there's a recruitment problem. That's not unique to Lee County, it's not. I mean, there's a recruitment problem everywhere, we all know this. But what are we going to do to combat that? It's our feeling that we need to be a little bit more competitive in what we offer our folks, our wages. So we look at our biggest competition. Biggest competition for Lee County would be Charlotte and Collier. The lowest ESP wage for these three counties, Charlotte comes in at $13.50 an hour, Collier at $13.70 an hour, and according to the data sheet I received this year in preparation for negotiations, the lowest ESP wage that somebody's making right now is $11.75 here in Lee County. So in order to be competitive, what do you need to equal Collier's $13.70? Charlotte would need 20 cents an hour to increase. Lee County would need $1.95 to increase to the amount that Collier is offering their first-year employees. That's significant. 20 cents not so much, but $1.95 is certainly significant. And again, we've got to be competitive. The percent, and this was pretty striking to me, percent of employees below $13.50. That's not even $13.70. This is below both of our competitors. 33% of our employees, of our SPALC employees, make less than $13.50. A full third make less than $13.50. We've just got to do better. So, for our proposal, and here's what we based it on. We're proposing a $1.96 increase for all bargaining unit members, retroactive July 1st. This equates to a maximum. The most any SPALC employee would receive would be an employee who works an 8-hour day, 255 days a year, that's 2,040 hours a year, would be $4,000. That would be the max. And then at the hourly rate, of course, it's going to decrease as you move lower than the 2,040 hours. This would give Lee County the highest starting wage in the area. Albeit it's only a penny, but we'd be a lot better off with that competitive entry-level wage than we would be without it. And the way we costed it out, it would cost $12.5 million. And as we've already seen, this district has clearly budgeted above and beyond the amount needed for this reasonable increase for our SPALC employees, and hopefully take care of some of these vacancy problems. And that's all I have. I'll just leave that up there. I like it.
Okay. Anybody have any questions or clarifications they need from Jonathan? Kelly?
Sure.
So I would like to do some clarifications on some of the information that was presented. You talked about the instructional materials categorical, and the way the district uses those dollars. I want it very clear to everyone, when you say the district put in $3 million for instructional materials, that we should have used the categorical for. The categorical is very specific, that it can only be used for adopted textbooks in the classroom. You have some flexibility where you can buy workbooks at a percentage of that amount. You can buy workbooks. Our district also uses non-adopted materials in the classrooms, and I cannot use those funds to cover that cost. So that is in there. Also, the reason you see the large balances in that is because the large adoptions take place different times of the year for different areas. The state has changed within the last 40 years, has been in the process of changing the adoptions. And so Lee County, knowing that we were going to have large adoptions come through for large groups, has been holding those dollars in order to make sure that when those adoptions came through, we could cover the cost of those adoptions. That's why you saw the big increase in the 11 million that was spent in 20. You'll see another big increase when you see that for 21, and you'll see another one for 22, because those adoptions are now coming to fruition that we were holding the funds for because we knew they were coming. So it isn't that we were holding money, not spending money. We were trying to be physically responsible with our dollars, knowing what was coming down the pike. Some other things where we were compared to Charlotte and Collier County. It's a constant comparison to Charlotte and Collier. Some things I would also like to point out. Charlotte County has gone out to their voters, and the voters pay an additional tax for their general fund operating so that they can offer more to their teachers and their employees. We would love to do that. We would love if you all would support and go out for that. We're just not sure Lee County would do that, the taxpayers would go for that. But listen, we're up for it. If you all would love to go for it, we would love to try that as well. Collier is not growing at the rate that we're growing. So what Collier does is they have a voted millage. So in the millages, when you're on your taxes, you have a required local effort piece, you have a capital outlay piece, and you have a discretionary piece. Because Collier is not growing at the rate that we are, they go to their voters to take a piece of their capital outlay millage to switch it over to the discretionary so that they can use it for their general fund. Unfortunately, because we are growing at the rate that we're growing, we cannot afford to do that. We have to have those, we're growing a school a year. We can't afford to transfer that amount of money from our capital dollars, which is what we use to build our schools, to fix our schools and things, into the general fund. If we could, we would, but we just can't afford to do that. So I just wanted to make those clarifications in those areas in the presentation.
Thank you, Kelly. Anybody else have any questions or clarifications for Jonathan? Jonathan, did you or anybody over at SPALC need to respond to that?
Sure, just briefly though. So the AFR also has the amount spent on textbooks as well. So from what you just told me, the categorical for instructional supplies from the state should then match up with the amount expended for textbooks or be less. Is that correct? I'm just curious. Because if you're saying that that's the only thing that the state categorically will be spent on is textbooks, then those two numbers in the AFR ought to match up.
So there's a page in the AFR on the actual categorical page, and that is instructional materials for state adopted. And what I said is we do buy other instructional materials that are not state adopted that we do use non-instructional material dollars for to cover. And I'm not sure when you say materials and supplies object code, which is very wide range, that's any supply item for the classroom for everything. It's not just it's clay, it's everything. I can't use that money from the categorical to purchase clay. I can only use that money in the instructional materials categorical for adopted textbooks and some non-adopted up to a certain percentage of that dollar amount, which we use to buy workbooks for like our music classes and our bands and things like that.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Well, just, I think for the logistics and the interest-based process is what was put up there as the final slide. Is that an option from SPALC that they're putting up?
Yes, that is an option that we are proposing.
So can I have that?
So, recognizing that we're sort of now into compensation, which I guess is fine, but we left last session with two proposals pending as options regarding pay for paras for coverage and also a bonus. And I didn't know if we were gonna pick up that conversation or just jump into this tonight, and that's fine. But if we're gonna jump into this, then we need a caucus.
What's the?
We don't need a caucus, but it's you.
That he wants to know, he said if you're not gonna jump into this, then they need to caucus. If we're gonna go back to what we did before winter break.
Correct. So we do want to keep them separate. So since we did our presentation, can we continue this conversation?
Did you hear that, Rob?
I didn't. Will was talking to Amy because we were trying to figure something out. I'm sorry, Elizabeth, what'd you say?
No problem. I just asked if you guys would be willing to continue this conversation since we just presented on it.
It's just we're gonna need a caucus, and it may be
No
fairly
problem.
lengthy because we haven't seen this proposal, so,
Yeah, no problem.
okay.
All right, then I guess we will be caucusing, and it will be fairly late. So if, Ralph needs to caucus, you know, your room, if you don't.
Get out.
Are you
It's his birthday, so Will went to get water. I was trying to wait for him. So our caucus report out is that we discussed, and I first want to start by thanking SPALC for presenting an option relative to compensation. It's always a difficult chore in a way to figure out where to start. So when you get a option up there, it's kind of good in interest-based bargaining because there's now something that we can all talk about and figure out where we need to go. So we talked about the option in a wide-ranging conversation, and as a result of that, we have some comments and probably some questions. And I'll just start with the fact that we appreciate the slide that had the fact that 33% of the SPALC bargaining unit is below the neighboring districts in Southwest Florida. And for us, that is why both in the last session before, maybe since we started, we have talked about assisting those employees that are at the bottom of the salary schedule. And that's also why we proposed the option relative to coverage when paras are basically substituting for teachers. We recognize that paraprofessionals, as one group, there's 1,200 of them in that bargaining unit that are certainly undercompensated. So we, the district's team, would like to focus moving forward on figuring out a way to assist those employees that SPALC has also spoken about that are having difficulty paying their rent, that are having difficulty in our current climate of inflation. And not necessarily that doesn't necessarily mean leaving behind anybody, but an across the board $4,000, not $4,000, an across the board 10% raise, which is essentially what has been proposed. We're not necessarily saying we object to the $12 million necessarily, but we don't think philosophically in this day and time across the board is something that we want to do to help our employees. And it has been done that way historically in this district forever. We've also done it with 2% and an almost $300 bonus last year. We've now heard a proposal or an option that's 10%. So it's a different time, we get that, and that's obviously been recognized by SPALC with their proposal that it's a different time. So I will tell the bargaining unit this: our current authority from our board does not cover what has been proposed. So obviously, we're not rejecting it, we just don't have that authority tonight here to agree to something like that. So we would ask that the indulgence of SPALC to go back with Kelly and her staff and figure out something that we can propose that does what we're talking about, which is figuring out the employee groups that we feel should benefit the most from what we're willing to do. And that doesn't mean there's going to be a group that doesn't get anything or that we don't propose gets anything. But across the board right now, philosophically, is not going to help us, and Jonathan mentioned recruiting. I don't believe across the board is going to help us recruiting, honestly. Because the one thing the presentation did not reflect upon is Charlotte and Collier and every one of the 62 school districts in Florida cannot find people So it can't necessarily all be based on compensation. And it's not. If anybody is paying attention to what's happening in the workplace, the Great Resignation is not necessarily all about compensation and benefits. And so we're willing to even talk about those issues, other than compensation, mental health, other types of things that the district can offer employees to benefit them. So we're focusing on compensation. That's what we talked about in our caucus. Does anybody else have something to reflect on from our group? Okay.
Did I hear an option in there to form like a subcommittee to meet with Kelly and her staff about?
No, I was talking about our people.
Okay.
Yeah. Thank you, though.
All right, anything from anyone else? Jonathan?
Thank you. And thank you for putting your own group together to discuss this further with your finance folks. Will part of that also include going back to the board and revisiting the authority, i.e. increasing the authority?
It's a good question, legitimate question. I don't know. I mean, I think that's part of our conversation that has to take place with the superintendent on our side. So I appreciate the question. I don't have a answer just sitting here.
Anything else? Arlene, want to pass the mic down to Arlene, please?
I have a question from last session. You said last session that you had approved additional 8 million, so is that not true?
No, I don't think anybody said 8 million. If I did, it wasn't for just SPALC. It was additional authority for all of the employee groups.
Okay, that's,
Yeah,
that's what it was.
Okay. All right.
So the offer that we offered, let me try to get this straight. You just want to maybe, if it go through, just do it for one set of group of people? Or, and then for the rest of the people, get something else?
Well, the latter part of what you said is the most accurate part. First of all, we're not necessarily endorsing or rejecting $12.5 billion. What I'm saying is we don't believe with the current times and where we're at with our salary schedules and the way people are currently compensated, that just giving an across-the-board raise to every single employee of the same amount, we're not going to not give a raise to anybody. Nobody's going to get zero, but my point is that amount to everybody, we don't believe is in the best interest of the district or the bargaining unit for that matter, because you have significantly, as was part of the presentation, 33% of the people in your bargaining unit make less than people do in Charlotte and Collier County. So we would like to have a significant focus on that, on those folks.
Anybody else? All right, it sounds like, unless we have something else on compensation, we're kind of at a holding point right now until the district staff can meet further and we may possibly have another executive session with the school board, superintendent, but I just wanted to, one more thing just to go over, so everybody keeps it in their mind. I pulled out the snapshot from our September 20th meeting with the interest for compensation, and it's recruitment and retention, which we've all talked about, morale, student achievements, respect, manageability, affordability, a living wage, and clarity. So that's where our interest, and try to keep those in mind as we continue to talk about compensation. Rob?
Oh, along the same lines as compensation is ESSER, which is another source of funds, and that's where we were talking about the $100 a day for paras. So I think Elizabeth, Will, and I had a little conversation. I think maybe we're inclined to go back to that conversation. And I know there was some desire from SPALC to talk about that relative to maybe some other employee groups. So I'll leave that up to Elizabeth.
Elizabeth?
Yeah, sure. I guess, my group and I were talking, and we just want to confirm that these conversations around the parapay and attendance stipend, or potential, I should say, will not affect our compensation. Is that correct? Like, we're keeping them both separate?
Well, that's an interesting, that's a very clever way to phrase things. I mean, everything is related, I guess, is my response. I don't know, the funding source for a bonus and the possibility of $100 a day for coverage for paras is coming from non-recurring dollars. So I guess you could say they're separate in that sense, because anything we just talked about relative to compensation, like your proposal, would be from recurring dollars. Does that make sense? But are they separate?
Yes,
Well,
that's what.
I think everything has to be taken into consideration. I don't want to say on the record that they're definitively separate.
We've made a commitment to our SPALC our SPALC members, that we are focusing on compensation, and that really is our priority. So I would just hate to talk about, 2 MOUs that have a sunset and that affect our compensation.
And I respect that. I understand what you're saying. And honestly, if we have to continue the compensation conversation before we go back there, I respect that. I understand that. And the pleasure is yours on that. We just have to do math before we talk about compensation any further.
Okay.
So, do you want to go back to the ESSER? We had some options up there when we left the last time before we went to break.
I want to know, yeah, we can address that. Okay, we can talk about it. I do have questions about it. Oh, do y'all want to address the ESSER tonight?
If we don't address ESSER, then we'll probably call it an evening. I don't think we have anything else to discuss at this point.
Is the district going to propose the option that they take our numbers back and come back with?
Sorry. We can do that. That's perfectly fine. I think it's still out there as an option. I don't think we're going to forget about it. But if you want to table it officially, we don't have any objection to that. Donna's kind of the interest-based guru here. Is that a necessity?
It's not a necessity. Whatever's gonna work for everybody so that we can finalize everything is what we're gonna do at this point, so.
Okay.
If you wanna table something, that's all up to you.
Okay, so I am kind of learning from my team. They do have some questions about the MOUs, I guess, and ESSER funds. So we are willing to move on to that if the district would like to.
You still have the option from last time, because I know it's gonna be weak. right, these are from December 15th. I don't know if we had any more than 2 options. I don't think we had more than 2 options. So I have both options up here. One option was an additional bonus for retention until end of the year. A date to be determined later on attendance. 2,000, 1,000 guaranteed, 1,000 based on attendance. Details to be determined, paid at end of the school year. The other option was paraprofessional coverage by increased coverage amount to $100 a day. And there was a concern if it will apply to all paras, gen ed paras may be used more, and that's when we started talking about special needs paras. So, those are the 2 options that we left off on in December. Any further discussion on those? Elizabeth?
Donna, I'm sorry, but our team actually would like to caucus.
Okay. Time frame?
15 minutes, please.
Okay.
We're good, we don't need to vote.
Okay.
and I think our report will cover the two MOUs and discussion I think we need to have on each. First, I want to say that I think naturally the district's response to compensation was brought up, even though we went to caucus about the two MOUs. And I will say that there's a lot of frustration and a lot of hurt from the team members about the district's response to compensation. The para MOU, it was brought to my attention that principals are actually using other SPALC bargaining unit members in the school. So we had discussion around possibly making that MOU applicable to all SPALC bargaining unit members in that school. But there still is the issue of equity, say for a one-on-one para who may not be able to sub because he or she is with a child. And I think that covers the para MOU. Do you want me to move on to the attendance MOU, or do we want to continue that discussion?
Can I just get some clarity on what you said about the MOU for sub coverage?
Para.
For para.
Para sub coverage, yes. Yep, it was brought to my attention that other SPALC bargaining unit members.
Okay. More people other SPALC bargaining unit members that may cover classes as well, beyond just salary. Will?
Before we move on to that one, I had a clarifying question, and then just also wanted to say, I know that's the COVID MOU. My understanding is that the way that it was supposed to be implemented was that schools were given a list of employees who would be eligible to provide that sort of coverage based on who met the highly qualified standard. And so I think we had a discussion in SPALC Labor Management about a similar situation where there was maybe some weird coverage going on, I guess. Maybe not weird, that people are seeing it, but weird in the sense that it's not something that we've ever encountered before. Is that what you're saying is happening now, where like you have rather than a para covering a class, you have a custodian or a food service worker or
the bookkeeper or other SPALC positions? Okay. Yes.
I think, I don't know if that's something that we would want to talk about in labor management, because I'm wondering like the extent of that and the frequency of that. I know there are some schools where if you told me that was happening based on, again, just what we've heard this week, I would not at all be surprised. I think we do need to address that. But if that's a constant thing, I would be concerned about, instruction for the students, and then also like for bookkeeper or others, who's doing their duties? Or are we going to have audit findings because, the bookkeeper is not able to do their normally assigned duties? And again, I'm not in a school day in and day out, so I don't know the struggles as well as people, but I think that would be something that absolutely would warrant conversation.
Okay, so there are schools that are using other people in the classrooms. Now, we don't have enough paras that's highly qualified. All paras are highly qualified. We had to, even if they don't have the AA degree, they did have to take that No Child Left Behind highly qualified test to stay in a classroom. I agree with the $100. But there's a lot of stuff need to be straightened out before we can go forward with it, because if you got 12 parents, highly qualified, 6 of them probably at life skills or pushing a wheelchair one-on-one. The other 6 is probably either sick, called off, have to leave early. So what are you gonna do now?
All right, Tony had her hand up. Would you pass the mic to Tony, please? Thank you.
I am one of those bookkeepers, and I've been doing it since the day I became a bookkeeper. I've not only worked in a classroom because I came out of the classroom. I was a para for almost 11 years at Royal Palm. When I became a bookkeeper, I've been able to float different places. I've never had any findings since I took over 8 years ago. It is very hard to sit here and do the job that I do, not only my job, but several other people's jobs, 24/7, almost every day, and not get compensated for it. And yes, I'm the one that had hurt feelings by what was said because I am also one of these people that is very sick. I had a life or death situation this year. Had I not been married, when I came out of the hospital, I would have been homeless. And yes, it hurts because I've given this district 33 years of my life. And I feel like it doesn't matter. What happens to me does not matter. And that's very hard to sit here and listen to. Very hard. Because I take my job very serious.
Okay. Here we are. Oh, okay. Here you can, please. Again.
I don't want to say that, I mean, in some cases, it probably is a normal occurrence. It's more, as the times go on, my school had an extremely high outage of teachers today. And it's probably going to continue for a few more days. And honestly, at one point, they were just trying to find bodies to make sure the kids were covered properly. And I don't think we should leave out the people that are willing to step up and make sure these kids are monitored instead of leaving them unmonitored in a school or in a classroom.
That's what's happening. All right, thank you. Will?
I think too, and I didn't, I didn't go down the row and say everyone's job, but I do know of situations like you're saying, a tech specialist, providing supervision, a security specialist in a timeout room, that kind of stuff. I think part of the clarification of where I was going with some of that was trying to understand, we had the same conversation with TALC around, coverage looks different for different groups of employees and at different levels. And so, a regular classroom teacher or paraprofessional in a classroom, the frequency that they're being asked to provide coverage is going to be different maybe than the reading coach. But again, the same concerns came up in terms of how does that person get their regular job done in addition to providing coverage, or is there some consideration given to the fact that at that point you're asking the person to do two jobs? And so something's got to give somewhere, and more money isn't going to, lead to more productivity. And so that's kind of, I guess, the question that I had. We also had some of the same equity concerns that Vivian brought up in terms of, not everyone's able to provide coverage too. And in some cases, you don't want everyone to provide coverage. You need your school counselor available if there's a student in crisis. And so some of those positions, I think, just trying to flesh out what the ins and outs of that were. But again, I think originally when we signed the MOU, the plan was that paraprofessionals would be providing the coverage because they're the ones that are closest to students, that have the qualifications that most align with what the teacher is expected to have. And if there's significant deviation from that, I think, again, we have to address that through labor management, and maybe also through bargaining.
I think the suggestion was, can this further be discussed in labor management? And I see Elizabeth nodding her head, so that maybe we can delve into it further and find out how many schools is going to affect, et cetera. So, you can refer that to labor management for further discussion, and they'll bring the information back here. Okay, Will?
And if there's individual examples where there needs to be discussion, I think, again, we can talk about those, because I know, again, you know, Ken, Tony, I mean, you guys are both at schools where we're hearing there's high absenteeism coming back from the break. And so, again, I know you guys are some of those schools that are in, you know, difficult positions currently.
Okay, so, back to, do we want to go to option 2 now? Elizabeth, you had said you had something on option 2?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, we're definitely open to an attendance MOU, but we are waiting for, I guess, the details from the district on, you know, what those days are, how many days, I mean, all the details to the MOU, but in general, we're definitely open to an attendance MOU.
Well, Will's gonna try to see if, I think we have the days, so if we could just give us a moment.
Sure.
That's open to options or for, you're open to discussing I guess, further.
And that's how it should be.
So I'm trying to find the dates, I just so that I'm not taking up everyone's time. I know that the discussion that we had in some of this was in SPALC labor management. So there was an interest on the district side of putting out, I think it was $2,000, with $1,000 to be a retention bonus at the end of the school year. So same as we did for first semester, to do that. The attendance portion, I think we went back and looked at what days are kind of the most missed days. So where do we need people the most? It probably doesn't surprise anyone that regardless of the year, even looking at the past couple of years, the most missed days aren't based on sick time, they're based on when people get paid. I think that just adds to whatever the problem is with sick time, but that's like the easiest time for, you know, people to take off to extend a long weekend, or they, you know, have money in their pocket, and, you know, I think that's probably consistent wherever you go. People take off just before or just after payday. So we looked at that. We looked at some of the data that was shared with the calendar committee about then kind of what are the most difficult times of the year in terms of employees being out and in terms of employee resignations. Again, this is probably not going to be a surprise to anyone in this room, but, you know, October into November is a difficult time. You know, that's when kind of the honeymoon phase is over. You know, you've had students for the entire first quarter. You know, their behavior maybe starts to change, and so people feel that stress and frustration, and winter break can't get here soon enough. So that's when we see a lot of people missing work, a lot of people resigning. And then the other times that seem to be big ticket times were kind of that February through March and kind of into April. Second semester, spring break can't get here long enough. You've got long periods with testing, which just adds to the stress level. You've got several weeks where, you don't have a Monday or a Friday off. And again, that just wears on people. So I think the thought was to target specific days, and I can get you the exact dates for this year. We looked at, there were 6 dates in the second semester, and they were, again, kind of evenly spaced every 2 weeks just about. Again, with maybe some outliers, if spring break falls on a certain week one year, or if Easter is a certain time, maybe that gives you kind of that natural pressure relief that you need. But looking at figuring out what those 6 days would be, and then saying anyone that shows up to work on one of those 6 days would receive additional compensation. That way, if you really do need to take that time off, you can take it. But for each day that you are there, you would get that additional compensation. So it's not all or nothing, but it is a way that you can say, okay, if I can just hang in there one more day until spring break, and I'm there on the Friday before when people are most likely to call out, then I'm going to get a little bit of extra money for showing up, for putting up with some of the headaches that we know are there on the Friday full moon, 2 days after Halloween, when everyone's loaded up on candy and those types of days.
Ken?
I guess my concern with this, or my question is, how would it affect 255 employees? Like, I'm year-round, I am the only tech in my school. I tend to pad my long weekends with a day, so I can have 4 or 5 days off consecutively to give myself a little bit of a break. I purposely do it around weekends or long breaks, which we don't get a lot of. Like this past summer, we had 6 weeks of summer, and I literally had 14 weeks of work. How would that work for us? Because it's really kind of a punishment where, like, as a tech, I'm trying to add on to these days, and I'm requesting, in advance, this time off. I'm trying to add on to these days and not take an entire week where a school will lose their tech specialist for an entire week during testing or something like that.
So that's honestly a really good question, and I can tell you, I personally, when we were looking at what different weeks were, and having been here long enough that I've had a couple days of vacation, I finally feel like, all right, I figured out if I'm going to take a day during the year, this is the best time for me to take it, because like you're saying, it's not going to impact bargaining. It is a school day, but duty days or other days where there aren't students seem to be the best days in some cases for me to come to work because it's quiet. I can get to what I need to. I'm sure you're in the same boat. I know custodians are. It's hard to clean around students. So I think as far as like trying to fine tune it or refine it or whatever, I think that's something that if this was something that we wanted to look at continuing to do, into the future, we would want to see that. We would also be able to maybe measure what is the impact. Does it actually make a difference and help get people, to come to work on those days where they're most likely to decide to take a day or a half day. But I think you're right, for 255-day employees, how you plan vacations, how you plan other time off, I think we would have to figure out, again, if we were going to do it long-term, a way to refine it. I think the immediate interest was trying to make sure that we have enough adults in the building to provide supervision on days that students are there. But again, I think it's reassuring to me to know that you're on the same, kind of train of thought as I was, because when I looked at it, I was like, dang, I just figured out this day in November is the best day to take a vacation. And it's one of the days where, if I'm in that position, I wouldn't get the extra money. So I'd have to make the decision, do I want to take that day or do I want the money?
Would the district be open to considering exempting the 255 from that? Because there's not a lot of us, and it's a matter of specifically the fact that, we already know that these are our best times to have the least amount of impact in a school.
I think that could be an option. I mean, I think we could look at that with different schedules. Again, we took like a first stab at it and tried to do a one-size-fits-all, honestly thinking that it would be easier to communicate it out to people, it would be easier to manage, and if it worked, then it would maybe be something that we would want to do moving forward. Another area, just to kind of throw it out there, that there was similar discussion was for substitute teachers. Are there certain days where we need substitute teachers more? And so if you could offer them a little extra for showing up, to provide you the support so that they're not taking the long weekend at the same time that everyone else is taking the long weekend, and then we don't have, anyone to provide coverage because, this is when the weather gets nice, or this is when spring training begins, and, again, this is when people are at their wits' end and most likely to need that time, or that they're just feeling run down and they're not able to make it that day because they're not feeling well.
Vivian, so is there anything in place for people need to go, we have 2 people that's expecting a baby within these months you just mentioned. And they probably will be taken off of, and these the dads, not the moms. The moms, but the dads want to be there when they have a baby. They want to be there too. And they were saying to me, well, what about us? If I take off within these times that you gave, these babies going to be born. Will they get the money? I mean, will they not get the money? I mean, with all we got babies coming in, we got people sick, we got all kinds of stuff going on.
Well, the purpose of the attendance bonus would to be at work. So you'd have to be at work. The way we've proposed it, I would ask SPALC though if they want the option of exempting 255 up there. It sounded like an option.
Do you mind if we amend option 1?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
I mean, I guess you could refer to option 1 in that option.
Yeah, you need to refer to option 1, because that has the amount of money in it. So, or just do it started on it. Okay, so option 3 is to exempt. To exempt 255. Right. Exempt 255 days for the attendance. Right. From the beginning point or from the? No, from the attendance portion of it. Okay, so this is what my current.
Okay, Penny. Penny has joined us.
Okay, so let me get this clear. So that would, if the 255 people would only get $1,000, they wouldn't be eligible for the 2,000.
It's not our option, so I was just trying to record
Okay, because that was my question.
what the 255-day employee said when he was speaking, because it sounded like an option. So I don't want to clarify your option for you.
So is that clarified that we would only be eligible for the $1,000?
Y'all get we're talking about different things here. I mean, no, she's saying the same thing. They will get the 2,000. They just be one exempt for not being absent and don't stay absent. Yeah. They won't be.
Okay? All right. Anything else?
Well, what was the clarification there? I'm sorry, I missed.
Well, they were wondering if the employee would only get 1,000 or would they get 2,000?
What are they exempt?
Well, I know, but they were talking amongst themselves, and I was wondering if they clarified it.
Yeah, what Donna said is what was clarified.
That they would get the 2,000.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
Okay, anything else on this? All right, do we have any other options?
Yeah, to add to that, I think if a vacation is approved for a 255-day employee, that wouldn't be held against you. So the key is to being approved. It's not a sick day, it's not an impromptu day off, it's an approved vacation day.
You want that as a core doctrine?
Yes.
Okay, Bill?
I know we're getting kind of tight on time because it's almost 6:50. We're gonna try and get the dates. Elizabeth ran back to her office to see if she could find where they were. I thought I had them in an email somewhere. I did? Okay, well, user errors then in my trying to find it through email, but we wanted to be able to get you the dates. I would put up another option, and this is kind of what I thought, so I'm glad that this was clarified, would be to create a different set of dates for 255-day employees. That if you could have the same thing in place, but say, these are the days where for 255-day employees, we really want people to try and be present if they can, so that it's equitable among all different employee groups rather than one group of people gets kind of a waiver or an exemption and automatically gets, the money that someone else has to do something to get. And we would have to figure out what those days would be, obviously, but.
Ken?
I'm sorry. I was just thinking that when you mentioned that we were dealing with two different parts. But yes, I do understand that. But I was thinking, since this was going to come to you from the ESSER funds through the end of the school year, and then I understood you as saying that you were possibly looking at doing this through, I guess, labor management or whatever to work into the contract itself.
Yeah, correct.
And that's correct, and we would obviously sunset this relative to ESSER, so it's obviously pending approval of our ability to do this through ESSER, so.
Okay, anything else? Dave?
So I've got the dates, and so we looked at it, and I'll just give you kind of by month, you know, if we were looking at 10 days, how we felt like they needed to be kind of distributed. So October, we were looking at 2 days. November 1, December 1, 2 in February, 1 in March, 1 in April, and 2 in May. And so that basically is kind of where, based on the days that people miss, we felt like it would fall for, okay, if we really needed people to show up these days, it's those 10 days. So I believe, looking at that, 2 for February, 1 for March, 1 for April, 2 for May, so the rest of the year kind of as it stands right now, based on this year's calendar, I think this is this year's. Oh, this is 2023. Hold on a second, sorry.
No, 22.
Glad someone caught me on that.
Oh, yeah. Oops.
Okay.
Your head.
I think we were looking at, this is the wrong one also? All right, hold on, sorry.
That's okay.
Maybe I don't have that. Anyway, it would basically be each 2 weeks. So we kind of had the first and the third, the first and the third Friday in February, the third Friday in March, the fourth Friday in April, and then the second and fourth Friday in May. Again, assuming that that lines up with the calendar the way that it would need to, and that those aren't days that we already have scheduled for people to have off or anything. But again, to try and give people that incentive on those times when we know, you know, you're most likely to need that day off, that it would give you the incentive for those people that decide to show up even when, you know, they would rather be elsewhere.
All right, thank you. All right, so we have all that information. Does anybody have a broad sign or anything that we could look at and maybe approve before we leave here this evening? All right, here another one over there. Ken?
Sorry about that. I think before we could do that, I'd like to know when this MOU would end. Would be a key component we would also need.
I think the thought was to do it for this year, and then I think again we could look at how it goes and decide, is this something that we want to extend to the entire year? You know, do people see it as an incentive that's worth it, or you know, do we need to look at adjusting the number of days, the amounts? You know, that kind of stuff could be looked at moving forward. And again, we've got the data to be able to show, you know, would putting this out there lead to, you know, improved attendance? I think again, it's not necessarily there to target the people who are legitimately, you know, sick and not able to be there. It's more for the people who, you know, I'm gonna take a personal day today. Those are kind of the people that we would be trying to incentivize to show up.
Okay, so 1 year, basically. And then you come back and revisit, correct?
Yeah. And that's again, that's based on the availability of some of the ESSER funding, which is, I think, how we were planning on covering that cost. FY22, correct.
I just have one more clarifying question. Since we're talking about dates that happened in the past, are we going to punish the people who may have taken those days off? Or is this going from today through, I guess, is it going from when we agreed to the end of the school year?
I think we would be looking at from basically the second semester. So starting with those February days, I don't think we would go back and look at, you know, again, who was there on that, you know, secret day off that I've now discovered that works for me in November. But I think that, yeah, and we would want to put it out there with enough advance notice that people would know. So, you know, if I had planned to go, you know, to a spring training game or to get a massage or just to have a day, you know, to sit quietly at my house by myself when I knew my kids were going to be away or my spouse was going to be at work or, you know, I was going to be able to get things done quietly on my own, then I might say, okay, well, I'll take the, you know, the additional compensation and I'll find another day to do that and I can work around that if I have enough advance notice.
Okay, anything else? Do we want to continue this next meeting? Seeing heads nodding. All right, so we're not ready to get started on tonight. It is 6:55. So, anything else? All right. Thank you. Our next meeting is January 24th at 4 o'clock. So we will see you then and have a good evening. Thank you.